Russia launches another attack in northern Ukraine. It's certainly no secret. We've all been feeling the pain at the pump this week. Health experts and policy leaders are discussing ways to improve and even expand COVID-19 testing capacity. New York City is implementing a vaccine mandate for private sector employees. Inflation is a word we're hearing a lot of lately, and it tends to make us all a little worried about our wallets. New York State Governor Andrew Cuomo facing a firestorm. The cost of war on full display over the weekend. From groceries to gas, Americans around the country are feeling the hit from prices going up. Some good news coming in today about St. Patrick's Day. Throughout the country, truckers are rallying together in trucker convoys. Many Americans have questions about mixing and matching vaccines. It's becoming easier and cheaper for people to make guns at home using 3D printing technology. We all know that a lot has changed since the start of the pandemic, including quarantine and isolation guidelines. If you test positive for COVID-19, do you know what to do? What if you're near someone else who has the virus? I think most businesses, most employees can agree we're all dealing with a worker shortage. What will you do to get New Yorkers back to work? President Biden says the U.S. will not send ground troops into Ukraine. Biden says the U.S. is fully behind its NATO allies, promising to defend, quote, every inch of NATO territory as Russia continues its attacks in the region. But he made it very clear that the U.S. will, quote, not fight the Third World War in Ukraine.
We're showing the strength and we'll never falter. But look, the idea that we're going to send in offensive equipment and have planes and tanks and trains going in with American pilots and American crews, just understand, and don't kid yourself, no matter what you all say, that's called World War III, okay?
Biden continued by announcing that the U.S. will welcome Ukrainian refugees fleeing the violence. That pledge came today as the president discussed new sanctions targeting Russia. The UN estimates more than 2.5 million Ukrainians have already left their country. It's the fastest growing refugee crisis in Europe since World War II.
And I will welcome Ukrainian refugees. We should welcome them here with open arms.
Ukrainians who are already in the U.S. can temporarily stay here legally. That's because of an order handed down by the Department of Homeland Security, granting temporary protected status for 18 months. That shields them from deportation. But it does not apply to Ukrainians who arrived in the U.S. after March 1st. Ukrainian war refugee children with cancer have arrived in Spain for treatment. 25 Ukrainian children with cancer who have fled the war in their country flew aboard a Spanish Air Force plane on Friday from Poland to Madrid, where they will receive cancer treatment. Still ahead on Fox 40 News, that impending snow isn't stopping the St. Patrick's 4-mile race, dedicated to bringing back its full race for the first time since 2019. This morning, Governor Kathy Hochul presented New York's 2023 budget to the Senate, highlighting a $216 billion spending plan for the state.
We're not creating recurring expenses or new programs we can't pay for.
Instead, Hochul says her fiscal plan for 2023 will use existing funds, with all proposed spending either a one-time investment
or are supported by the expectation of a reasonable growth in revenue as projected by our Division of Budget.
In just 20 minutes, Hochul broke down the numbers, including a $32.5 billion investment in roads and bridges and $31 billion for education.
And that brings us to the highest level the state has invested in education ever.
Healthcare also getting a record investment, $10 billion to try and build back the workforce and retain current employees. Of course, at the center of the speech, COVID recovery. Hochul is proposing $2 billion for pandemic relief programs.
And I'll work with the legislature to identify the most impactful use of these funds in the short term.
And wants to fast-track a more than $1 billion tax cut for middle-class families.
At a time when inflation is robbing families of long-awaited gains in income.
As for helping small businesses after an especially tough 2 years, the Buffalo native is proposing $100 million in relief money and $250 million in tax credits for COVID-related expenses. Hochul says the 2023 budget is a responsible plan, investing where it's needed while padding the state's reserves for a rainy day. And in response to the governor's budget, many local leaders sharing their thoughts. Assemblywoman Donna Lopardo saying, quote, "I appreciate the governor's fiscally responsible approach to this year's budget. She is taking advantage of historic federal resources by making sound investments in healthcare, education, infrastructure, and tax relief for hardworking New Yorkers. Governor Hochul is using the moment to address many underfunded areas while preparing for a strong economic future," end quote.